I don't know why like everybody's like distancing themselves from wanting to see Marathon fail. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people. They're like, well, that would be shameful if I wanted to see it fail. Like if I was rooting for its failure, I'd be embarrassed by that. I'm not. I'm not ashamed of rooting for its failure. Let me explain why, though. I don't like for me, I'm not a big fan of like depriving people of the things that they want. I don't really give a shit. You want to like the game, you do you, and everything. But I don't know about you, but I'm with everybody that's ever bitched about microtransactions and the fact that these studios, they, for lack of a better word, they want to extract as much profit off of our backs as they possibly can. And I say, ironically extract because this is an extraction shooter that we're discussing, and I've been discussing on my channel for a few weeks now. In private, I've been using ChatGPT to study Japanese, but anyways, the but if I had to justify like my hatred of this sort of thing and everything, and I wanted to say why I would root for a project like this to fail, well, it really doesn't have as much to do with Bungie as it does Sony. Sony spent a ton of money to acquire Bungie. Sony has been pivoting towards this live service stream, and we all know why they want to do live services, so that they can sell us on, skins and everything, where people get nickeled and dimed, $5 here and there, and eventually it starts adding up to real cash after a very short window of time when you're buying and buying and buying and buying and buying. They consider these cash cows, and that's why they want to get a live service success. But these are if you get one that actually resonates, you get a lot of people. But quite often these are a big risk, and they don't often pan out. They far more often than not fail and everything. And Sony has gone all in on this strategy, and to such an extent that we've begged and pleaded with them not to and everything. And the only thing that's left for us is to withhold our wallets and not spend money on their fucking products because of the fact that they are making this live service pivot. I would advocate that you boycott the PlayStation 6 when it launches. I've been heavily considering selling my PlayStation 5 onto the market on eBay and everything, and getting rid of all this. Just Sony's massive missteps in all of this, and the damn mistakes that they've made during this whole process and everything. And it's not just that, it's just I don't want to see this company succeed at doing the most greedy thing that it could possibly do. And microtransactions are peak greed. This company wants to make you game your way into the poorhouse and everything, and doesn't give a shit about you. They only care about their profits. They've never cared about us and our perspectives. The only thing they care about is the moolah. It's all about the Benjamins for them. And so they want this fucking live service thing. And I mean, I get that they're a business and everything, but them being a business and everything, they have to respond to market trends, and they have to, they have to give the consumers what the consumer wants. And if the consumer doesn't want live service games and doesn't want, to pay money for, a system that, it's just, maximum greed, eventually they're going to have a meeting about it, about the fact that their consumers feel nickeled and dimed to death, and really just don't want to spend that kind of money on, live service games and everything, and that they're not in the mood for it. They don't want it, and that the company has taken massive hits on project after project that they've made chasing this dream, and it's failed. There's going to be a boardroom meeting, and they're going to have to rethink their decisions, and, something will have to give eventually. Now, do I think Marathon failing will be the end of Sony's live service streams? No. But, every time Sony tries this and it fails, brings us one step closer to that meeting taking place at the headquarters back in Japan and in the United States. Like, every time something like this happens where the game doesn't sell that well on the consoles or the PC, that's one step closer as a failure to, a world in which Sony has to have a meeting in the back room, and they realize that their consumers just feel exploited too much and don't want to cough up that kind of revenue to them. They don't want to, they want to have some fun and everything, but on a budget, within reason. They don't want to spend a ton of money, gambling themselves into the fucking poorhouse on skins and cosmetic features and all that other stuff. And while that might be good for them, it's not good. What's good for the goose isn't good for the gander in this regard. The consumers don't want to do that and everything. And to get involved in that, it sounds like a way to just put yourself into the poorhouse off your hobby. It doesn't seem appealing very much to us and everything. And, it just, everybody knows why they want to do this, but it's peak greed. It goes a little bit too far, and it's disgusted gamers for a long time. I mean, how often have we heard complaints about microtransactions? It's been a constant thread throughout the gaming community. So, do you really want to see this company, Sony, succeed at launching a live service title where they're able to make a game that basically bankrupts gamers all over the place? I mean, do you really want to see that? Do you want to see Sony succeed at this strategy of peak greed? I certainly do not, and so, I don't, and plus I never really had any attachment to Bungie. I never was a big fan of Halo, I never played it. I knew it was a big thing and everything, but I just didn't care. I was always a niche RPG, gamer guy that, the games I played were like Lunar, the Silver Star story and that sort of thing. Lunar Eternal Blue, Final Fantasy, Octopath Traveler. Like, I'm not interested in these, big, shooter games. I just don't care. That might be like a big chunk of the gaming market, but I'm not a part of that, And so when Halo launched and everything, I saw that it was big, but I just didn't care. It was just oh, hey, that's of interest. There's this other thing, and a lot of people seem to like this. Oh, well, I'm going to do me, sort of reaction to it. So nowadays, I'm here. I'm still here. I'm still around. I'm still, it's still at least some of my hobbies. I do a bunch of different things, to stave off boredom. But, I can't help but stare at the glistening failure of Marathon, and in fact that it isn't doing that well on console, and it isn't doing so well in the Steam charts, per the data that we're getting in about it. And I laugh because, I mean, this is yet another project that Sony has spent a ton of money to acquire, and they aren't making their money back on this live service pivot. So every time this happens, Sony gets one step closer to having to rethink the whole live service pivot. And that's really what this boycott that I'm now a part of is all about. It's about forcing Sony's hand and saying, hell no, we won't go. We're not going to accept your live service pivot. So you can either have our money and abandon that approach, or you can, keep that approach and go broke. Your choice, Sony.